Alrighty, so we're going to jump right in. We're going to start off with some introductions for our wonderful guests here for the Fireside Chat today. So I'll pass it over to John Mark. I know he's still en route, but if you just want to do a quick intro for yourself, it'd be great just for everyone to know where you're coming from. He might still be in transit. So, David, why don't we go over to you? I see you're already off mute there.
Yes, hello, and thanks for having me on the panel. David LaRue, and have a firm called IQ for Hire. IQ for Hire basically helps clients go through and understand what their e-commerce needs are, help them go through the selection process, build out solutions, and help them do with the strategy. So that's what I do.
Awesome, welcome. And I saw your background. I think you undersold it a bit. You were an e-commerce for many years, running many companies. So that's great to have you on.
Thank you.
And Thomas, over to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me as well today. I'm VP Sales here at Orium. Orium is a systems integrator consultancy. We very specifically focus in the headless and composable space. So for the past 5 years, I've been helping brands navigate what before, when we were building it, wasn't even defined by Gartner as composable commerce. And then we've seen a pretty interesting wave since of a lot of people following that path. And it's matured, it's changed, it's advanced, it's pivoted in many different ways, and that's my every day of the job. So excited to kind of dig into some of the trends for next year today.
Love that. Yeah, you're going to be the perfect speaker for some of the trends we're going to talk about around headless then. So the agenda for today, we're going to cover 3 topics, but also as things are coming up and you have questions, throw them in the chat. I will either bring them up organically during our conversation or we'll address them at the end, depending on the topic. So just throw anything in the chat there. There's also someone monitoring LinkedIn, so feel free to throw things in there as well. But to get right into the topics here, what we're going to focus on today is what is the role of AI in commerce today, in the shopping experience overall? There is so many different ways it can, so we're going to cover some of that, and I'll get to it in a minute. Then we'll go into some headless and composable. Like Thomas mentioned, his expertise since the beginning has been in composable commerce. What does that mean? What are the benefits? What are the risks? What do we need to look for? And what are the trends in 2024? And then finally, we're going to get into social commerce. It's the number one thing we see as we're going through our scan reviews and our error reviews is, the web view browser is not great, but so much of our revenue can come from social commerce. What works there? What are the big trends this year? And what are those platforms doing for us so we can get better at it? When we think about AI, it can come from so many different areas. It can auto-generate our descriptions, our images, all these other things. I was talking to a friend of mine who runs a company that does razors the other day, and he used AI to completely design all of what his POS systems could look like in various retailers, in Kohl's, in Right Mart, in Shoppers Drug Mart, and he had it all mocked up just using AI prompts. But what we're finding is, 70% of online conversations are now being handled by AI. My sales team, a lot of the outbound messages are generated by AI. When you're going to websites, all of the suggestions, 35% of Amazon sales are coming from the related, you might like AI-based references. And everyone is expecting it. I think 84% is probably just that my parents don't like the personalized responses, but like everyone else likes when it's personalized, when you get to a site. And we have a lot of customers that ask us to set up page checks to look for things like, does this personalization element load? Because I want to make sure that the experience is personalized and really monitoring that. So it's prevalent in all areas of commerce. Then switching gears into headless, this is a really interesting one for me. So I'm so excited to dive into these questions later. Obviously everyone is saying it drives much more customization and flexibility. You can really put things together that you weren't able to do in the past. And that's been the basis of Thomas's whole company at Orium. But it also just allows people to change that front end so much better as sales are coming, as things are plugging in. I was at Majuri's office the other day, and they were talking about all the sales they were launching and things they were doing for the holidays. And being on a headless infrastructure allowed them to do that so quickly. But it also just allows us to integrate into more platforms. You're not stuck in these one thing. You're not stuck with, okay, all of Adobe's tool sets or all of Shopify's tool sets. You can plug and play whatever you need to make the business run. So we'll be diving into some of those questions later. And I'm very curious on the risk side of things when we get into that as well. And then social commerce, it's just it's almost what social is now. It's like pictures my mom has liked and shopping. Those are the two things I see in social, and just huge amounts of revenue are projected to come from this space. So really interesting to hear everyone's perspectives when we get to that. So getting out of the screen share here and into some of the questions, what I'll do is I'll ask a question, point out someone so we can dive right into it. I think the really interesting thing is we have such a diverse group today. So Thomas and I have been trying to meet in person at every conference. We keep passing in the wind and not actually meeting one another. So this is our first time chatting. David was just a huge conversation starter during our first fireside chat. So we wanted to have him on and actually drive some of the conversation. And then John Mark, JM, we ended up meeting at Shop Talk Chicago, the first Shop Talk in the fall, which was a great event, very small. So you were able to meet one another and actually have conversations. And so excited to dive into some of his experience at Versace and other companies before that. So diving into AI in e-commerce first, I wanted to hear what everyone's, number one thing that happened this year. What was the trend that happened in AI this year that you saw? So we'll start with Thomas. Like, what was the most requested thing that your customers were asking, we need to implement this thing of AI this year?
I think that's probably the missing part of AI for me this year is nobody knew what the thing was. Everybody knew what the word was. So you talked about Shop Talk Fall. Like a lot of the conversations I had there is like, why are you here? Oh, we're looking for AI. Great. What are you trying to do with it? More efficiency and more growth in the business is what we're trying to drive. So I think we've seen a huge wave of what it can do. And I think people have done a good job translating, the 5 and 10% efficiencies in their day-to-day from using AI. But I've also seen a big trend of people not knowing where to put their dollars. That's going to lead to ROI within the year. And I think that's been a constant loop where now that we're on the tail end of the year, we're starting to see people saying, great, can we actually define the business case for our AI as we move into the following year? But I've also seen pretty much everyone use it in their day to day. To your point, emails, messages, business cases, documents, even emails are getting written from internal communications perspectives without the thinking power that goes behind it. So I've seen a lot of people use it in their day to day. I've not necessarily seen as many people find an ROI use case that really drives bottom line revenue for the business.
Interesting. And David, what about yourself? Have you found any interesting, really ROI driven use case so far?
So I'm gonna break up my answer into a couple of different pieces. So one is sort of the back office side of it, the operational side, which I think I'm aligned with Thomas there. The people kind of go, well, what can I use AI to do to make my organization more effective or more efficient? And so if you're intaking items and need to understand what that item is that you're intaking, right? And the use cameras, is it the thing that I actually have in front of me, the thing that I'm supposed to get, right? So there is this identification or vision portion of it. There's a component of it too that is around data cleanup. So in order for me to use the data effectively on the front end, I got to make sure I have the data on the back end. Okay. And so I think all of our organizations have had data lakes and all kinds of data that's been collected over the years. But in those data lakes, we have a bunch of logs and a bunch of stuff that's on the bottom of those things that is not necessarily that optimized because we don't really have maybe all of the processes or data governance that we probably should have, right, over the years. So how do I bring, and this is some of the use cases about, taking all of that data and then I've got to cleanse it, right? So in the case of getting it into a PIM, it's like taking all of that data, match, merge, cleansing, survivorship, and then comes the descriptions, and all of these things are augmented by either machine learning, right? So I've got to pattern recognize and do those kinds of things, to the large language model pieces for doing descriptions and those types of things. And often there's more than one description that needs to be made and different sizes and those types of things. And they need to be made in the brand voice, right? So if I'm doing different type of commerce, different places I'm doing it, and I'm doing social commerce, my ability to put descriptions are limited, right? Versus a website where I've got much more detail. So once again, getting in the right brand voice, putting in the right it gives me ability to do multiple descriptions relatively quickly, right? So we see that. And then on the front end side, I think everybody is pretty familiar with bots. I don't know how exactly successful everybody is on implementing bots. I've had some interesting conversations, especially on the B2B side here in Atlanta, a lot of organizations that are selling to other companies. And they're the kind of the perfect way to help somebody find complementary items that go with those items, right? It helps to define, what items go with this item, which is difficult in B2B, right? It's very complex products and those types of things. So I see a huge opportunity there, and people starting to use it in that regard. So cross-sell, upsell, personalization, obviously, and then combining that with the MarTech tools in order to give that, that experience that is, focus on that individual customer based on whatever they're doing on the website or what they purchased before.
Yeah, I definitely hear that. And I even the other day, someone, a friend of mine is a pastor and couldn't think of how to write a sermon. I just used AI and then wrote it in like my voice or in, because I'm on so many webinars or all of that. And it just becomes so much faster to take a big description, write it down or up. I even talked to somebody at Shop Talk that the image actually creates the description. You're not even having to create it the first time. And then the image also then gets product placed in whatever room you want. Really interesting use cases. Jean-Marc, welcome. Thanks for joining in. I know you were just en route there. How about yourself, whether it's at Versace or one of your previous companies, any like tactical ways that you used AI to drive the site?
Absolutely. So I think we touched on product recommendations. We at Versace recently moved to a newer platform with a built-in AI capability when it comes to product description. So definitely something that we're looking to leverage even more. The thing is, it is based off machine learning. When you launch a new platform, you first you first need the machine to learn to really push product recommendations. So it took us a little bit of time to build on the knowledge that would then adjust recommendations, where we got to a point where we felt pretty strongly about what each individual visiting the website was presented with from a merch standpoint. Of course, client services as well and chat prompts have been supported by AI, which is extremely efficient. At Versace, we carry products that range from a $50 bottle of fragrance up to a $4,000 dress or handbag. As much as we love every customer, you can't spend much time and invest as much time for someone visiting a product page that would show a fragrance and a product page that would show a dress that was on the runway. So being able to address customers with AI is definitely super helpful and something that we were looking to developing even more. One thing that I am looking forward to leveraging more would be from a forecasting standpoint, making sure that we leverage AI in a much wider capacity. I was with Gucci before I joined Versace, and I consider those older fashion houses to not be so much on the forefront when it comes to leveraging tools for forecasting and for merchandising planning. And I still see buyers working off Excel spreadsheets when it comes to planning demand for a holiday, which to me is absolutely insane. So this is probably going to be one of the key focuses, making sure if you have a business that has foundation with products with lots of movement and with lots of units moving, making sure that you leverage AI in the best capacity to forecast.
You literally stole my next bullet point. Was going to be all about demand forecasting. I was talking to some customers, I guess it was last week, that's exactly it, especially in a seasonal business like clothing, where there's seasons that you're planning for and constantly recycling new products. You need to be able to demand plan those, because doing it in a spreadsheet and with the complexity of how many SKUs you have, but also the sizes, that's why it becomes even more complex than physical
Of
objects.
course. Yes.
that, using AI to plan some of the back end. And the other thing, David, you mentioned this when you were talking around the risks of AI is like, is your data lake clean? Well, with inventory planning, that's actually the one database that's not bad. It's pretty clean. It's not like, our logs and some of our systems stuff. Where Noibu comes in, we've started to use AI to recognize which of the errors we're surfacing impact on actually are customer impacting. And so we're ingesting the videos. And so now AI, the machine learning and the LLMs can actually ingest the video and say, yes, this issue is actually impacting and blocking a customer from checkout. But that's still not enough. That gets you to maybe 50% accurate. You then need the inputs. And so then if your system is able to say, here's the 10 that we surfaced, and oh, the customer only accepted 5 of them, that means the other 5 aren't good. It learns from that. And then you get to 6, and then you get to 7, and eventually you get to the accuracy over time. So it's one thing to think about as well when you're implementing AI. It doesn't need to be 100% accurate from day one. If you're getting 50% of the way there and then training the model from that, you can really get it down to the accuracy. And we've all seen that with Chat GPT over the last 3 years. It's gone from okay to great just because it's learning from everything that's being inputted into it. So another thing to think about. Thomas, when you think about the risks behind some of the implementations of AI you've seen, other than the data quality, kind of what do you really make sure your customers are thinking about?
So I think that the initial wave of Gen AI or ChatGPT specifically, there was a lot of fear around governance. Oh, if I put sensitive data in, I'm going to get myself in a lot of trouble. And I think that's kind of eased itself in as like we've seen the enterprise licenses of OpenAI come in, and we've seen like some of the other training models. That governance is almost forms itself as a whole industry at the same time. I think some of the risks that I still see is the more customer facing you get with something that's fully controlled by AI is where it gets a little bit scarier. So, when you consider the PDP page and recommended products, that's a pretty low risk scenario. Maybe you show a male, person that similar shoppers to you buy these products and there's 4 dresses across the carousel. I mean, there might be a little bit of offense there, but that's fine. When you start thinking about what the long-term goal of Gen AI actually is, and a lot of the research and development we're doing at Orium is around fully front-end built interfaces that can be fully controlled based off of customer data or browser data or past history data. That's where you can really go wrong. Because if you create your homepage of your website fully controlled by something that's inputted on by different data, that's where you're taking control out of compliance, and pull requests are a thing of the past and content editing approvals are gone. And now it's like, great, the Versace brand is at risk of exposing a bad customer experience, not once, but for all customers. And I think the more you lean into AI, you've got to incrementally improve piece by piece, because I don't think we're all at a comfort level of just unlocking that level of customization there yet. But there's certainly a path to get there with the right steps and control procedures in there. So I think it's about understanding what you're doing, how you're doing it, and then making sure each increment you take forward, you just pause every now and then to reflect on, are we moving too fast? Or are we unlocking too much control from what we're trying to achieve?
I like that. And I think it also depends on what stage you're at, right? Like you mentioned, Versace probably shouldn't just allow AI to build their website. It's probably a bad idea. But if you're an SMB who doesn't have the resources and wants to get a website live, interesting choice. Like try it out, incrementally walk your way into it, let it do the first draft, let yourself get into some iteration on it. There's just so much potential out there that you can take more risks when you're in certain areas. I like that point. Like, what's the risk profile of this use? David, yourself, like, what's your favorite use case so far that you've seen one of your clients use AI for?
Favorite, it would be one that they're happy with, right? And the customers are happy with, right? And so it's sort of a loaded question. I think there's expectations out there, just like Thomas said, it's going to be more efficient and I'm going to be able to do this with it, right? I'm going to get this ROI off of it. I think AI right now is so new, right? That we really do need to explore all the different opportunities. So I think what needs to happen is clients to be open to new ideas and to go out there and try different things, right? Because it's new. And if you're not trying, You can't differentiate.
Yeah, I like that. It's a little political of you, but I like it. It's like if they're happy with it and it worked and they got better conversion rate, that's my favorite one. So let's switch over to headless and composable now. And actually, John Mark, because we didn't get to chat at the beginning, what's your level? Like, is Versace and some of the websites you've managed, have they been fully composable and headless, or what have your sites been?
Not really. And I think that's really what we need to transition to. This is again an industry that has websites that are usually like very dated and that have transitioned to new technologies. So we cannot wait until we finally transition to options that are much more flexible. When it comes to a front end, and we touched on it a little bit earlier, we need to make sure that based on the different audiences, you can offer different experiences. And that's not necessarily something that we've been able to do. For many different reasons, we usually inherit old solutions that have to be replaced, but also luxury considers that one experience is the only way to go, because you need to be consistent across the different messages that you send about your brand. Now, when I speak about the business I'm in with Versace and the huge difference between the low AOV products and the true luxury products that we carry, of course, and the different ways of getting traffic into a website, you should have different experiences and you should be able to customize. So this is a really interesting era to finally be able to build different audiences and probably bring them to different experiences based on where they're coming from. So headless is the future, and it's definitely something that we should be considering to make sure that someone who has searched Versace fragrance is not necessarily exposed to the latest runway drop with an average of $4,000 per product, because this is not necessarily something that is of interest for them.
Yeah, definitely. And we've kind of made a specialty of ours to be the error monitoring for brands like yours. And we have one customer. There was an issue that happened this year where they had something got priced for $25 instead of 25,000. A little bit of a problem. And so now we have a page check set up. Nothing should be under $1,000 on their site, just to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
It's every transaction matters. Or another customer, they track a unique identifier that is a founder of one of the big tech social platforms that orders millions of dollars a year. So they want to make sure that person never has an error on their site and really being programmatic on that. So I definitely hear you on your one voice. So Thomas, since you've got, this has been your world. When we think of, all the benefits of going to headless or composable commerce, how do they align? And John Mark covered a bit of it, but how do they align to what customers' expectations are of web experiences today?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely spend a large portion of the money hours a week I work speaking about headless and composable. And I think a big cause for this shift, I mean, if you take a step back, technology just pendulum swings every couple of decades. It's going to be custom, it's going to be buy, it's going to be back to custom. I think the attempt of composable commerce is to give brands the control to manage the middle ground and stop the drastic swinging of that technology strategy back and forth, and allow brands to decide what they want to build, or in many cases, how they want to differentiate themselves, and then where they want to just buy the commoditized aspects of what they do in their day to day. So like, what I don't recommend e-commerce companies doing anymore is, building your own cart or managing your own checkout APIs, or managing the session of a cart login. But what they should absolutely do is make sure that PDP experience, like what Jean-Marc mentioned, is differentiated between the $4,000 dress and the $25 perfume, and can bounce in between different experiences as the user navigates that, end-to-end relationship with the brand. And a big thing that we've kind of worked on is, when we started doing this 5 years ago at Orium, it was the innovators that wanted to lead the charge. We want to be different in branding. We want to really have a unique experience. what we've seen now is a lot of brands have just embraced composable, but they don't want to fully differentiate themselves. They just want to differentiate themselves in pieces. So I think a real big benefit that has developed probably in the last 12 months more than headless and composable in general is you can incrementally differentiate yourself in the experiences that you deliver to your customers. If you want your homepage to be completely different to your competitor's homepage, you can do that. You can do it by just procuring a CMS and a front end, or maybe you do it in the cart and checkout. And then I think the really big benefit is the retail brands or the B2B organizations that don't just operate in, selling t-shirts in one country, in one currency, in one language. It's the brands that have that innate complexity built into their business models. That's where you nail composable commerce for me, because the clienteling experience can be the same CMS search and commerce solution that is empowering that associate experience, as is the e-commerce, as is the mobile application that you're operating in. And the economies of scale that you get from delivering experiences with the same services between channels, I think that's one of the biggest benefits that you can recognize. Um, I don't like to say site speed and, design is the benefit of composable commerce. I think that's the benefit of headless. I think having a headless site, you can design it differently and it can be faster. I think when it comes to the topic of composable commerce, it's about the services and the channels that you put your content in.
Yeah, no, I like that differentiation between the composable and the headless. We had a chat with a customer this week where their web health, so we have performance monitoring in Noibu, and we saw their web health was all green, LCP was amazing, INP, like they were doing really good work because of their headless infrastructure. But we were seeing some curious errors, and that's why we were chatting with them. We were bringing them these problems, and it turned out it was like they were optimizing for LCP to get all their SEO benefits up, but to do that, they were delaying the load of their cart. And so when people added to cart too quickly, it wasn't there. And so then we were having the conflict. And so you've got to balance it as well and make sure you have that monitoring in place and understanding the risks going into it. I've had some other customers tell us, oh, we're going headless to eliminate some of the issues we've had in the past. And I'm like, that sounds backwards. Like perhaps we should get to the root cause of the issues before you say going headless is going to remove all your errors. And so with thinking about risks, David, what risks have you seen your customers really need to consider before moving to a composable or headless infrastructure?
So yeah, I think a lot of companies are still monolithic, right? So they're set in what they have, and then they're going to have to move from one paradigm to another paradigm. And it's a paradigm shift, right? So part of that paradigm shift is also, I think, when you do your content and you're taking that content and zeroing in on it, one of the cool things is if you ask marketing between the two different technologies that you would use, they're going to want the one that's most flexible, which ironically is composable or but at the same time, it's going to be different. There's going to be change management that needs to be done to be able to do that, both from a technology perspective and the implementation and ongoing support. So you get reusable capability, reusable content, but you have there's a downside risk to every single one of the things that you do, because you're going to have to change the way that you do things and your workflow processes and how things are going to be done in your company. And to the same point that Thomas brought up is that you get reusability, but also the downside of reusability is when you change it one place, it sort of it proliferates all over the place, right? So it can affect multiple things just because you have one channel and another channel and another channel that they're all basically leveraging the same technology, right? But different data. So it's got a really good point because it makes it effective and efficient from a technology perspective. And then there's the change management and deployment complexity that you have a little bit with headless. I'm a huge fan of headless. I think the change management piece is the part that has to be thought of. I see Thomas has got your hand up.
Yeah, and I think it's one of my favorite parts of the conversation that you have to raise early is your like a common equation that we're given is we've got 30 developers in house. we've been on our commerce system for 7 years. We're struggling to get features out. We're falling behind our competition. And guess what? All of our performance metrics are getting harder. And then we work with them, their technology team evaluates technology landscape and they get to the decisions like, great, we're going to do composable. And then it's like, great, now let's open the conversation on the other side of the business, which is the non-technology team. And let's have a conversation of like, what does your day look like today? And it is a massive paradigm shift because, that, content editor, product owner of the site has had to learn CSS because, the current CMS doesn't do it. So they're like hacking pages together to figure it out. And then it's like, oh, great, you deployed your content into the web and now you've got to do the same thing for your native application. So you've got to like really work hard with a different dev team to be able to achieve that. So when you launch on Composable, you've automated maybe 50% of that person's day-to-day job. But what's really difficult for that person is they have to then think about their job description going forward because they've got one CMS that can do the same thing in 2 channels much more seamlessly, but they don't know what to do with this space and time that they've gotten back. And I think that's one of the most serious conversations to have when you're adopting new technology in general, composable or not, is when you empower people to do more in the business side, you have to change management that power too, because people get lost on that journey. And it can be a pretty tough experience for somebody that gets their job description turned upside down because of a technology initiative as well.
Yeah, that's a super interesting point that people I don't think of, like, and it's the whole reason that Mock Alliance exists, where it's like these tools allow you to interconnect things well when you're going to composable or going to headless. If you've just got to watch out which tools you are going to plug in, because to your point, Thomas, like you have to make sure that they're all API driven and that they're all going to connect, and otherwise it may actually double the workload. You could go the other direction if you're not careful. And so for anyone out there listening, definitely check out the Mock Alliance and their suggested vendors. Happy to say Vidyard or Noibu rather is on there, and really excited to start working in that ecosystem a little more as we've kind of realized the move to headless and composable also just introduces all these new connections and new things that we need to be watching and monitoring for. And so we're the only monitoring platform that's in there today, which we're very excited about. John Mark, I know you haven't moved to headless yet or to any of these systems yet, but when you think of like the trends you're seeing with your peers and with any conferences you went to, what was the one big thing that a lot of people were talking about this year with regards to composable or headless?
It's exactly what I was describing earlier, making sure that from one experience you move to 5 or 10, depending on the audience you're building and the segment you're going after. And we touched on Marcom earlier, investments in performance marketing have increased, and the spend is so high, has increased so much over the last 18 months that you need to make sure that if you get someone on your website, it's the right person, and that they get the experience that would fit the profile that you think they have in the best way possible. So I think we're all going to a place where we want to make sure that we invest our marketing dollars in the right segment. And once we get a click and a visit, we have something that's going to make these people engage and obviously convert in the best way possible. And I think we were not there yet. Especially again in luxury fashion, we would send most of the traffic to a homepage, and from there, visitors need to find their way around the site. We definitely need to shift that. So what we've already started doing is, and it's really it sounds so basic, but again, we're talking about high-end luxuries. At least having a female, a male, a kid's experience that's different on the homepage, depending on the profile that we see. And then, of course, based on the different categories I mentioned earlier, someone shopping for a handbag should not be exposed to a product that costs $50, and the other way around is very true too. So that's where everyone's mind is right now, making sure that we build those experiences, differentiated experiences.
Yeah, and that's actually a great transition into the social commerce because that's, I think, so integral to that. You're able to really segment your ads nowadays in social to those different personas. If we just kind of stay with your basic personas of, female, male, child. Um, how have you seen that kind of evolve with your brand, and what are the main things you're really thinking of specific to social commerce?
I think what we're trying to figure out now is is finding out if we would rather that social commerce happens on social platforms, or if we want to bring them to our fully branded online destination. And I think we need to test. We need to test those audiences. We need to test TikTok Shop. We recently completely refreshed our Instagram shopping experience. It's super important to figure out where we want the transaction to happen, and again, to take this example of like the fragrance versus a gown, it's probably best that someone who is in the market for fragrance maybe checks out on Instagram because it's easy, and I may not want to collect that much data about that person. But if someone spends $4,000, I would rather that they come to the website, that I kind of put them on the path where they have to sign up and create a profile, so that I'm sure that I have like the marketing opt-ins that are necessary to go after that client and try to clientele afterwards. So social is and has been like a great source of acquisition, but we also need to understand how we want their conversion to happen, and how we work on retention. So I think that's what we're going to try to A/B test and work very closely with platforms like Meta and Instagram Shopping to figure out, again, if we want maybe all transactions, I'm just making that up, but like all transactions to happen on Instagram Shopping, or really try to have like a transition into my website after a few touch points within the Instagram Shopping experience.
Super interesting. I'd never thought about the fact that if they're buying something that premium, you actually want to slow them down, get more information about them. Like, it's not just a transactional thing. You want them back at the next season buying the next, branded thing. It's super interesting. Thomas, I saw you on mute there. Did you have something you wanted to add in?
Yeah, we had a similar experience about this earlier in the summer, where I think social media and social channels for shopping is, yes, helping people sell in different places, which is great. Like in my world, that's another head that you can service in the composable world. I think where it's actually causing a lot of friction is there's not the same amount of control in that channel that brands would like to have or retain, specifically in the bigger brands that operate. So, if I'm a small startup company and I just want to sell, my t-shirts in a specific way, I can load my SKU catalog from Shopify through into Meta and start selling on Instagram. Awesome, great experience. But I think when you're like Jean-Marc, you mentioned like $4,000 or VIP customers, or the experience we seen earlier is they sell subscriptions for beauty, and then if you subscribe at different tiers, you get different pricing. I mean, that's just impossible in the concept of what TikTok shopping or Meta shopping lets you do today. And it's a very tough conversation because your board or your P&L owners are saying, hey, I just got to get more revenue from the social channel, guys. Like, figure it out, go. Everybody else is doing it. And it's very frustrating for teams where like, well, we're a subscriptions business. We don't show our pricing until you've subscribed, and then we can do that. And you've got to then begin the journey of, can you navigate the integration paths, the workarounds, the capabilities that you need to solve in that way. So I think it's interesting in that it's a great opportunity. And I think there's resulting in a little bit of sameness in those social channels that the luxury brands of the world or the differentiated brands really don't want. But you're being forced into those channels because that's where the whole world is right now. So you've got to find a way to be present, just not the same way that you're present on your own digital channels today.
Yeah, and I think you've hit it right on. There's a lot of testing going on, and I see it in my own personal life where you click on something and then it's like, oh, that's actually Wayfair business, and you have to sign up, and so you kind of hit this wall, and I've abandoned it every time. Or you click on something else and you have to like fill in a form to be able to look at that vehicle, and you're like, no, I'm not going to do that. I just wanted to see the vehicle. And so we're all going to have to like really test out this and like monitor carefully of, to John Mark's point, like if we're trying to get them to log in and create a profile first, what's that drop off, and is it worth the benefit long term? And being able to set up measurements for that. So David, on your clients, what's the biggest trend you've seen this year, whether it's already been talked about or not?
On the social commerce side, I would say a couple of different things. And when you have a unique product or a configurable product, you have the data that needs to get back and forth, right? So you have to have a universal place to put the data. You can't just upload your product because it's not like a t-shirt, right? So as the products get more complex, as they're more configurable and they cost more, and what that lifetime value of that customer is, right? So you're eroding that a bit. So I would say that I agree with Thomas. It's kind of funny again. Here we're talking about smaller products that I want to be able to move and approach the different channels, which is really awesome. So in other words, what am I going to do on Facebook versus Instagram versus Pinterest? What is my messaging? What's my target audience? What's the product I'm going to be offering? What's the specials or the discounts on each one of those channels? Is it different? It gives me all kinds of opportunities to test, right? And it gives me ability to go out and find non-traditional customer groups that I'm not necessarily targeting now, or they don't see. So it gives me more brand expansion. It gives me more exposure. It drives more potential traffic to the website. It gives me brand awareness, unaided brand awareness. So it has a huge amount of opportunities, but you have to look at it and be able to measure it, right? So one of the folks is using Hootsuite, which gives you a little bit of metrics ability to look at how those things are doing and understand, is it effective what I'm doing versus what I'm doing on my typical e-commerce site. But matching up those data sets, once again, is a bit of a challenge because you have multiple sources of data now that you have to normalize or at least have some sort of an understanding when you're bringing them together for the board meetings. Is it, where's the data coming from? Where's the sales coming from? Am I bringing them back to my website? Where did I originate? What's my origination cost? All those kind of things, right? So there's multiple layers to it, which is awesome. And I will add that I'm pretty excited about another channel that we haven't really talked about, which is, with the LLMs, there's shopping on these LLMs now, right? So it's different than the social commerce, right? And so what I'm seeing there, it's exciting, is that there's a couple of 100,000 younger people that are using this for search. And so it's going to, I think, deteriorate the value of a Google or a Bing or any one of these things. And you're going to be in an ecosystem that doesn't try to find something by starting out at Google. You're going to start at the LLM. You're going to do your shopping, your research, and your purchasing outside of the typical ecosystem that we see today.
Yeah, and actually Vinay asked that in the question here. I was going to bring it up later, but how do you think about adapting your product strategies, your descriptions, your SEO essentially, but your LLM SEO? We're going to have to come up with a name for this, but how do you think about making sure your products are actually going to show up in those platforms?
Well, not only show up, but you got to remember too that, is it going to be unique? Is there going to be the same canned description if I'm, sort of a product that's all over the different place? Am I then only a price taker? Is there a differentiation in service or anything else, right? So there's a lot of different questions, not only finding it, right, and having the right SEO or the right tags to it, which is, you have to track it. You have to put it into a someplace and you have to do your analytics on it to go figure that out, right? But there's other things you need to figure out too.
Yeah, I see Thomas. He's
Yeah,
excited for this.
there's also like a new variable, which is like the time of the data, which is kind of a tough one, right? Like a good test of this, and I've done it a few times, is like try to go shopping on ChatGPT. Like I'm looking for top of the range skiing gear. I want to buy jacket and salopettes. I want you to recommend like a matching colored outfit that's red, and I want it to be at this price point. Link me to 5 products that it would be. I'm gonna guess 3 of the 5 are PDPs that you don't hit. You're gonna try hit it, and the URL will be accurate when that data was hit by the LLM, but you don't actually have that. The inventory's gone. They've deprecated that product, or it's a year old. So I think there's also this weird variable of like they're gonna have to get live product data with live inventory data, which at the best of times you struggle to do that in your own e-commerce website, never mind in ChatGPT. And then you've also got to do, David, what you've mentioned around how do you merchandise it, how do you present it in the right way, and how do you attract someone to it. So it's kind of like a new metric that we don't know how to solve for, which is like how do you time data in these large language models that actually can be used in a shoppable experience, or is that just not possible? And I think that's kind of where people like Google get the advantage, where they can, like, Perplexity is your search result pretty much whenever they want it to be these days. They get to control all that traffic, but they're going to start losing that traffic pretty quickly, to David's point. And let's see who else rises to the top of the discovery experience that exists out there.
Yeah. And kind of zooming out even, this was a question that Kyle brought up right after we had finished the AI conversation. So I want to go back to it. When you start thinking about AI hallucinations, this is kind of a different version of hallucination. It's not a hallucination, it's just old. It's just the old data. So there's that issue within LLMs. And then when you're using AI to actually build your site, the hallucinations become a problem. And so when you think about using AI to develop some of your site and respond to support tickets and things like Kyle mentioned in his question, how do you safeguard yourself against any hallucinations? Maybe it's answering for your brand about something that's 2 years old, and so even within your own website, you might be answering something that's out of date.
So I'm gonna give you guys an opportunity plug, right? Because the way that you guys actually gather the data from these websites that I have Noibu on, right? You actually potentially see it before I do.
Yeah, it's all in within half hour.
So I think you kind of look to that tool, your tool, right, to say what can I do and how can I monitor that? Because it's a different kind of monitoring, right? It's not, it's did I transact and did I do it in real time? What was the friction? Is the friction from lack of product or whatever it is? You're going to see it probably before I do.
Yeah, we could actually set up a monitor that looks for any dead links that your chatbot is responding with.
Correct.
Because then it's like just flagging hallucinations that are happening, or age of page or things like that.
Right. And then it becomes potentially the learning feedback model that helps build the better model in the first place.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Jean-Marc, anything on your end about thinking about how to get the products into these LLM platforms? I'm not sure anyone's gonna go to ChatGPT and ask about a $5,000 dress, but anything you guys have thought about?
Yeah, I'm not sure there's like so much like, let's say, tangible use for now when it comes to fashion. No, not necessarily.
Just too fast of a turnover of the seasons and everything. Yeah, until
Yeah.
they become more real time. So on your side, it might be more relevant here. Michelle's question from LinkedIn. What do you think are the 1 or 2 omnichannel experiences that you're considering game changing lately in the last year or two? I'm sure you've been thinking about it lots because you want the store experience to match the online, to match the social. And so, what's like the 1 or 2 things that you got excited about this year as you've been going to conferences?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, because I
Yeah,
think
so
you'd be the one looking for it.
not necessarily going into conferences, but I think what we've been implementing and what we've been achieving with quite some success is connecting stores to clients in a way that's just so much more valuable and conversational. when it comes to store traffic and engagement with clients actually going to stores, people are shopping online. People no longer have the same routine and going to a mall, going to a retail location the way they used to. So we completely switch to a model where we have stylists in stores that need to speak to clients remotely and engage with them remotely. And what we've been able to do is that if someone shops online and we have their consent, we share this contact information with stores, and stores become another way, another touch point for these people who have shown very high engagement with our collections. And it's so funny because we've been talking a lot about AI, but there's still a huge need for human interaction when it comes to fashion, when it comes to luxury fashion. And I think, if anything, what we've been able to achieve is really, of course, having a mix of, let's say, programmed interactions that are supported by a new clienteling tool that we rolled out in store. So I'm talking birthdays, purchases, anniversary, let's say prompts, but of course, real human conversations coming out of the tools that we put in place. So I think that's something that we've been very excited to roll out, and where we've seen success, because clienteling in our industry is becoming a very strong part and a very huge revenue stream that completes a web browsing experience, an online purchase, and so on.
I love that point of using the web to actually drive people to your store in certain instances, like premium goods. I was chatting with a company this week, Canada Goose, the down-filled jackets. And, you can't, Michelle's question kind of referenced augmented reality, like anything that's worked in that, or mixed reality. You can't really experience negative 10 degrees in a nice down-filled coat without actually going to their stores. And so Canada Goose actually has a room in their stores that is negative 10 degrees, and you go in there and you put the coat on and you have that feeling. And very similar, I'm sure, you go into a Versace store, you feel, first of all, wealthy, second of all, pretty, and then you get that feeling of, wearing that dress, trying it on before you're making that big purchase. But Thomas, interested to hear if you've got any kind of different omnichannel experiences or big things that have happened this year.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, I mean, one of my favorite use cases for composable commerce is when you find an ability to use the same solutions within the different channels. And that's kind of like what Jean-Marc mentioned around breaking down the digital channel to the store channels and how do you make them work together in a more cohesive way. There's a really good example I always like going back to. It's Harry Rosen. I can post the URL in. They sell, a broad range of luxury goods on their site. They have a number of stores across like Toronto and some other regions in Canada, but their big thing is they're a very personalized experience. Like, it's a generational brand. Your grandfather bought his suits there, your father bought his suits there, you'll buy your suits there. So they've done a really good job breaking down the e-commerce channel and finding the solutions that they've used in a composable commerce architecture to deliver just an amazing multi-channel experience. So for their clients, for example, their associates in the store can build carts and suggest products and have product laydowns. And not only is it like you show up at the store and you're going to see what products they're going to recommend to you, but they've already sent you those products. You've already texted them back to say which ones you don't like and you do like. You'll get a text message after the appointment to say, here's the ones you tried that you didn't buy. Here's the ones you did buy. Here's how you can further browse them. And then they've managed to integrate odd parts of that experience together into their web experience that has a lot of similarities. So like they've implemented visual search on their website. I think the mixed reality question is there. Where is it relevant? Back in the supply chain issues like a year and a half ago, luxury goods, you don't just sit around with 50 Tom Ford suits in the back office. So if that good isn't there, you can take a picture of it. You can see what are the other ones that they sell. Where's the inventory of those products? Are they available in the store? Can you get them through an online purchase? Or are they in the other Harry Rosen store in Toronto? So I think they've done a really good job merging the channels together, blending the same software services that they use in those channels to be very seamless, and then being very customer centric in their approach. So things like, your points in your loyalty program can be handed to your children or passed along to others. And they've built sustainability into some of their best practices in the customer experience as well. I've really appreciated the way that they've approached their digital transformations and the experiences that they've brought to the market as well. I think it's quite on the edge of what the retail space is doing.
Very interesting. Yeah, I was just on their site this week, and just from that one connection, now I'm getting pretty personalized social ads. Even though I didn't add anything to cart, I just kind of clicked around to two or three things. A customer of mine was mentioning how great their site was, so I was clicking around, and now it's like hyper personalized whenever I'm getting any of their content. So very interesting. Recognizing we're running out of time here, I'll start wrapping things up. I just want to say thank you to all of the attendees we had here today. Make sure I didn't miss a question. Nope, we got one. Oh, there's one more. No, we already answered that one. So we answered this one live. Excuse me. But as we wrap up, I'll just do a little recap here of what we talked about. AI, it was interesting. We talked more about AI and how to use it on your site, how to generate your site, how to help people in these roles. But at the end there, we actually got into more, how does AI even drive people to your site? How can you use the new ChatGPT search? How can you be making sure you set up your brand for success for the future of AI? So it really kind of expanded that, which was great. Then we got into composable and all of the headless infrastructure, the risks and the rewards there, the ability to actually accelerate some of your product development, but also just making sure that everything is connected together, making sure you're leveraging Mock Alliance to make sure everything connects well and that it's all seamless, and leveraging tools like Noibu just to do some self-plug to make sure there's no errors along the way, that things aren't conflicting with one another like we discussed. And then we got into social commerce, which was a very wide topic. We went from omnichannel all the way to much more personalized social and online stores like TikTok Shop and everything. As we get into that stuff and you're starting to drive people from your site, Noibu does offer a free site scan. So essentially you can put a tag on your site, and for a few weeks, we monitor all your traffic. And then we just hand back, here's the top 10 errors that we have seen. Here's the number of customers that were impacted. Here's a bunch of videos. Here's the technical root cause. So even if you don't work with us, you get some value right out of the gate. And always happy to chat more about this. Thomas and David have both seen our platform in action with their clients, and hopefully John Mark will in the future, but I don't believe we've crossed paths yet. So it was great meeting you at Shop Talk. If anyone has any questions or anything, the team will still be on LinkedIn here answering questions, and feel free to connect with me directly if anyone has questions or concerns. Thank you so much, everybody, and thanks to our guests today.